Hello everyone, good evening and welcome to this evening sessions, Who Writes Europe's Rules? Amazing that you're all here. I must say I'm very honored and very happy that you have chosen to be here instead of lying at the beach or in the water somewhere. No, you've chosen here to discuss Europe, to discuss Europe's future, to discuss democracy. And I think you already deserve a big round of applause for yourselves for this. This is just a basic sign of encouragement. So we're going to make this a great session with some amazing speakers. So I can assure you, you will not be disappointed for not being in the sun this evening. My name is Dylan Ahern. I'm one of the directors of Demo Foundation and of the Kiesmannen. And our role here in the Netherlands and a little bit in Europe is to boost democratic engagement, mostly among young people and sometimes also for a bit less young people. And it's my honor to be your host today. And we're mostly here to celebrate and discuss European democracy, but especially in the light of this project, of Project ECHO, which harnesses the power of art and culture to really spark that debate about the future of Europe. Because we believe and we know that artists, creatives have a really powerful way of connecting to people, of mobilizing a lot of different people, and maybe have a different way of inviting people to think about many of our pressing issues of our time, such as democracy, such as biodiversity, climate change, migration, and AI. And to do so, we set up 5 different campaign academies in 5 different European countries, where we invited creatives, young people, I see a lot of young people here in the room as well, to think about these issues and to come up with creative strategies and ultimately campaigns to get even more people to think about sometimes very boring or complex topics. So tonight, you'll be hearing from 5 different representatives from these campaign academies across Europe. But we'll also have a conversation about who rules Europe, basically. Who writes Europe's rules and who are the people that actually call the shots in our European Union. We did this together with 5 amazing partners who established these campaign academies across Europe, 5 countries, and each country tackled their, let's say, one of the 5, what we think some of the most pressing European issues. So again, we started off in Amsterdam, AI, Barcelona, Berlin, Sofia, and Athens. So here we are. Who writes Europe's rules? Because as I just said, we were trying to engage young people, you know, to have an opinion, have a say in what they think should be on the agenda, on the political agenda in Brussels and Strasbourg. But as we all know, it's quite difficult to get some influence in the European Union. And so who has power? Is it us citizens, ordinary citizens, or is it other people and organizations that actually call the shots? Maybe it's also lobbyists. And the big question is, can we, citizens, have as much influence as lobbyists, as corporations who also try to exert influence over the European Union? That is also the question that we will try to answer today. Who holds power? How can citizens gain power? How can civil society organizations also make a voice for human rights, for nature, and for other interests? And to start off, we'd just like to start off with a tiny quiz to see how the audience is doing. Yes, are you ready? Let's start with an open question. Who actually feels that your vote carries more weight than lobbyists walking around in Brussels? Who feels their voice carries more weight than lobbyists in Brussels? Ooh, very skeptic audience tonight. We'll see if you're right after the show. How many lobbyists do you think there are in Brussels? You can shout numbers now, except front row. This front row, maybe yes. How many lobbyists are there in Brussels? What do you think? 1,000. 3,000? Did I hear 10,000? Sold? No. 12,000? 30,000? I wrote down as the right answer, but I think no one will really know. But it's somewhere along the lines of 25,000. For every dollar an NGO spends, I don't know why this is in dollars. For every dollar an NGO spends to influence policy, how many dollars do you think a corporate lobbyist spends? In other words, what's the ratio of corporate money versus NGO money? 1 to 800. It's not that bad, I can tell you. 50? It's 5 to 1. They only have 5 times as much as NGOs. It's 800 or 5, you know. So the top 162 corporations donated 343 million annually on EU lobbying. By contrast, all registered environmental, social and public interest NGOs in the entire EU collectively spend around 74 million. Now, citizens can also exert influence in a different way. You know, kind of like a European petition called the European Citizens Initiative. Have you heard of this? Yeah, most people have. Okay, cool. How many signatures do you need to have like a legitimate petition that will... 1 million. That's the correct answer. Is this a lot or is this doable? Is it not a lot? No. Yeah, so you know, 1 million across the EU. Okay, so we're getting more optimistic. I like it. I like it. Okay, so who has more civil servants? The municipality of Paris or the European Commission? Who votes Paris? Because it's France. Ooh. Any French people in the room? No, it is indeed the municipality of Paris. I'll leave it at this. I think we have quite an informed group here tonight. I like it. I'm super happy again that we're going to discuss this. And tonight we're going to dive deeper together with the European policymaker into this topic. We'll hear from the media and journalism side. We'll hear from the advocacy side. And we'll hear from government side. And last but not least, we have 5 cherries on the cake, which are indeed the Campaign Academy representatives who are going to pitch their ideas and shine some light on the citizens' perspective on how to influence Europe. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome a member of European Parliament of the Netherlands. She is part of the Socialists and Democrats group, and she was one of the lead rapporteurs, negotiators on a big sustainability package. And it's probably going to fall a few times. I'm already going to introduce it to you, the CSDDD or the CSDDD. I hope Lara has a fancier name for it than this. But she's going to talk a lot about it because it's a fascinating story about how policy is being made in Brussels and influenced really by citizens, policymakers and corporate lobbyists. So can I please get a warm round of applause for Lara Wolters. Any mic you like.
Yeah. Shall I go here? All right. Nice to see everyone here. You've said it, the weather is beautiful and it's my job to be at events like this, but it's your choice to be here, so thank you. We'll make it extra fun. We'll make it extra interesting tonight to make sure that you don't regret your decision of coming here. And Dylan asked me in the lead up to tonight to prepare an opener to the topic of who holds power and to tell a bit about this famous CSDDD law, which is a long story of power and lobbying and resistance, but which is also a very painful story, because it's the story of something that went right and then went wrong again. But we will get to that, and we'll talk about how that came about and what we can do against it. And I wanted to ask, to start off with a few simple questions that are not on anything policy related, but my first question was, who here, when they feel an energy dip around 4 p.m. and they buy themselves a chocolate bar, thinks about who picked the cocoa? Hands up, I see one. Or when they order a t-shirt online, I think it's going to be a similar answer. When you buy a t-shirt online, do you think about who put that t-shirt together, who sewed it? More hands, all right. Do you think about where they did that, how much they made? Ish. So when I was 20, I did not think about those things. I can say that we lived in different times with less information, but I think that's a bit of a cop-out. I think most people don't think about who and what and why. And for a long time, companies selling things didn't have to think about it too much either. But for me personally, things changed after the Rana Plaza disaster. The Rana Plaza disaster, I think a lot of people here will know the images, but the building that collapsed with lots of garment workers in it that were trapped, and tragically, people who were sewing together our clothes and who had said that the building was unsafe and who had flagged that there were cracks in the walls. So for me, that was a trigger to when I became a member of parliament, and I have been for about 7 years now, for the Social Democrats. That triggered me into helping write a law, the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, a supply chain responsibility law that would force large multinationals to take legal responsibility for what happens in their supply chains. So no more turning a blind eye to sweatshops, that was the idea. No more looking away while forests are razed. No more children picking cocoa so that a company can hit a profit margin. And crucially, if a company looked away, and in the Netherlands I started calling this the anti-wegkijkwet, if a company looked away and someone got hurt, that victims would be able to go to court. And European leaders had doubts. There was a long phase in which the fate of this law was uncertain. And at some point in this whole trajectory that lasted almost 5 years, I was so fed up that I lost my cool in Parliament. And I think that we've got a clip of that.
And if I sound angry now, it's because I am. We had a deal. But business lobbies would not give up, and here we are. These leaders have now become convinced that accountability is a burden and human rights are a nice to have. For them, fair competition is speaking big words about European norms and values and then encouraging a cutthroat race to the bottom.
So I don't know if that speech helped or if it was all those people coming together in their anger, so myself, of course, but also NGOs and trade unions and even academics, journalists who contributed in their way by shedding light on what was really going on in supply chains, but all that pressure on leaders meant that in the end we did succeed. And this law, when it finally passed in April 2024, I was even more emotional than in that previous video. I think we have a couple of pictures also of the context or the project. So this is us all working away on this law. This is what they say when they talk about those back rooms in Brussels or where all the decisions get made. But so that's that process. But sure enough, within months of that vote and of our big victory in the European Parliament, and getting this through the Parliament, something shifted in Europe. And that was after the last European elections. And those brought gains for the far right. The far right didn't do incredibly well in those elections, but they did fairly well. And they did well enough to shift the needle in the European Parliament. And the center right, the Christian Democrats, who are the biggest group in Parliament, decided that they quite liked the view from the far right. And so I'm telling you this to tell you that, yes, we had a victory and a law was passed, but very quickly afterwards, and this is also why there was so much emotion, there was a lot of resistance, and that resistance was then channeled into attacking the law once again after those European elections where the right made gains. And so the same law that had just been approved a few months earlier was put back on the table. And Ursula von der Leyen, her name is probably very familiar with most of you, but the president of the European Commission, so the person who gets to decide what gets put on the table, what gets proposed, she was freshly reappointed as Commission president, and she announced that she would simplify this law. And simplify, I think, is a beautiful word. It sounds very reasonable. It sounds very helpful. Who doesn't want simplification? But what it meant in practice was that companies would barely have to look beyond their own front door in the new proposal from the European Commission on this law. The right to take those companies to court was gone. The whole thing was hollowed out in the proposal, supposedly in an effort to cut red tape. This is another phrase that you might have heard. And then we have a clip of me coming to terms with that, and I probably didn't do a very good job of coming to terms with it.
En wat er verder gebeurt, dat zal ons allemaal worst wezen.
Dat producten duurzaam op de markt terechtkomen, dat was het idee van een nieuwe Europese wet. Producten zonder kinderarbeid, gemaakt onder veilige omstandigheden. Maar rechtse partijen in het Europees Parlement vrezen dat te veel regels slecht zijn voor de economie. En nu is die nieuwe wet, na een sterke lobby van tegenstanders, een heel eind afgezwakt. De stemming van vandaag gaat over wat de anti-wegkijkwet wordt genoemd. Die wet maakt bedrijven verantwoordelijk voor misstanden bij hun toeleveranciers. Maar het Europees Parlement wil dat die wet voor veel minder bedrijven gaat gelden. Tot grote teleurstelling van GroenLinks Partij van de Arbeid.
Ik vind het heel erg dat hier wordt gezegd, wij gaan een economie bouwen in Europa over de rug van kwetsbaren en over de rug van het milieu. En dat we hier zeggen, onze economie eerst en wat er verder gebeurt, dat zal ons allemaal worst wezen.
So on this, the Christian Democrats, so again, largest group in the European Parliament, hugely influential in Brussels, the group, the party that most European commissioners hail from, they were able to get this new version of the law through Parliament with far-right friends from all over Europe. So the far right, we are talking the Alternative für Deutschland, Marine Le Pen's party that you probably have heard of, the Peace Party in Poland that has done a great job at dismantling the rule of law, and Geert Wilders' PVV. So for the first time in the history of the European Union, a major law was pushed through with the far right against the votes of every pro-European progressive party in the center. And that is something that has happened regularly since, and I'm sure we'll get to talk about it later. But the question that I was asked was, so who runs Europe right now? Who holds power? And the honest answer is, it is not us. It's definitely not progressives at the moment. It's not regular citizens, not even the ones who voted for extreme parties hoping for radical change. The situation in Brussels at the moment is unlike I have ever seen before. Right now, NGOs are being chased and defunded. Trade unions are being frozen out, while CEOs get more access to the Commission than I have ever seen. Journalists, and Lise will tell me if this is a fair picture, but are having a tough time scrutinizing this Commission. Ursula von der Leyen, I think, hasn't held a proper press conference in years. And those of us in the center or center-left, they're caught in this impossible question, and that question is, do we stay or do we go? So do we stay? And what I mean with that is, do we cooperate with the most powerful group in the European Parliament, those Christian Democrats? Do we stay to limit the damage to things that we hold dear, to the things that we find very important? So do we stay to cooperate and do that as much as possible, even if it's painful? Or do we go into full opposition mode? And do we leave them to do their worst with the far right? And do we just say no to everything in the hope that at least being clear on what we don't want and what we stand for will make us do better in the next elections? And we haven't found that answer yet. It's very tempting to switch off, even for us, and to conclude that at the moment Europe is captured and that fighting is pointless and that lobbies and right-wing populists always win in the end. But then, last year, a campaign called My Voice, My Choice, and this was a European citizens' initiative with the 1 million signatures, fighting for the right to safe and legal abortion across Europe, did something remarkable because they gathered those signatures and then they spent months quietly identifying allies on the center-right, and they put pressure on politicians that said one thing but were in danger of chickening out through national media back home. And then in the most right-wing parliament ever, they won. They got the resolution that they wanted through parliament, and they didn't win by being the loudest, but they won by organizing. And I think that that word, organizing, used to be at the heart of progressive politics. And somewhere along the way, in the age of social media and outrage, and maybe us getting discouraged by the elections that haven't been going our way for quite some time now, I think that we have started doing less of it. And then when the question is, as Dylan asked me before, what EU can do, I think it is that. I think we need to start organizing again. And who better to help me with thinking about organizing and giving you cues on organizing than the people I'm going to share the stage with here. But if you wonder at the moment what organizing could mean in practice, or if you think that organizing maybe is not for people who are not in politics, then I would say, I think organizing really starts with just having a conversation. And that can be at dinner with your friends, or it can be with your family. But have a conversation about what is actually happening in Brussels. Maybe take this story to make it practical to people around the table, to make them understand what this is about. But that alone, I think, already matters. And then, of course, there's always more that you can do. If you can, sure, join a trade union or join an NGO or donate if you have the means. Because I think that the people dismantling the laws that are protecting us, or the laws that are supposed to protect us, being dismantled right now, because sadly this is not the only example, they are betting that you won't bother doing that. And all of these things, even if they're not going to yield anything in the very short terms, need to be done until 2029. And that's the next European elections. And that is the moment when citizens do get to answer the question of who runs Europe. And as big as those lobbying budgets might be, you have something that those lobbyists can never buy, at least not in Europe at the moment, and that is your vote. And for me, the world has never felt as uncertain as now. And I think that this generation here, if I look around the room, has huge amounts at stake in Europe's future. We all know what we're facing in terms of climate and workers' rights and democratic accountability. And I think that the next years in Brussels are also going to be about who we want to be as a continent and what we stand for. The next years will be crucial on that. And while the right is counting on your cynicism, the left, or the center-left, whatever you want to call it, but is counting on you showing up, staying engaged, and refusing to be written off. And I'm very happy that we get to talk about all of that more with the panelists.
Thank you so much, Lara Wolters. And please stay there. And before I invite the other panelists to join the stage, I would also really like to give the opportunity to ask a question or two. Who wants? Yes, in the back.
Yes, thank you for the interesting presentation. I have a question. Can you maybe take us a bit through what's the process of these lobbyists? How do they approach a member of parliaments? And what's the incentive of these member of parliaments to cater for their needs? I mean, is there some hidden links also that are not revealed, or Because, I mean, it is quite a powerful influence indeed. But how does it happen, the lobbying?
In practical terms, it's usually things like coffee requests or just meeting requests that members of parliament take or don't take. So there's nothing shady going on usually, you know, with people meeting in parking lots or money exchanging hands. I mean, most lobbying is perfectly normal and even, I would say, healthy. I'm a member of parliament who you won't be surprised to know doesn't know everything. Most members of parliament might have expertise in one area, but not in all the things they're working on. So the exchange of people from the outside coming and telling you things about, wait, but this is how things work out in the real world, or this is what, you know, the law that you're writing might have as an effect. That's not so strange. I think the problem with it is when things become when they get out of proportion. And indeed, when there's so much lobbying and there's so much internalizing of the arguments of lobbyists, and that happens, I must say, of course, more on the right side of the parliament, then you start to get lawmaking that is heavily skewed in one direction, because again, those NGOs and the civil society groups, they don't have the same budgets to go and push their message.
Great question. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Did I see another hand? Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much for your talk. Maybe a bit of a personal question, but I can imagine that with something like the CSDDD and then it gets passed and then it gets changed, that it's incredibly frustrating and maybe demotivating. So what helps you to stay motivated and hopeful?
Yeah. You're right. I think I said on the call we had before that this whole process was painful, and I don't recommend to anyone doing this sort of thing where already, you know, it's a roller coaster and then having 2 children in the middle of it, and it's a bad idea. So do not try this at home. But what helps me stay motivated in this parliament, where very little at the moment can be done concretely to counter that power, is things like this. And so what I've started doing more is werkbezoeken, any kind of getting out of the parliament and talking to all those other people out there who still believe in change and who have things to say and where there's energy. Because I feel at the moment in parliament itself, it takes energy from me, because it's very tiring to lose battles. And to see votes, you know, go that far right way. But so I think for me, myself, getting out of the parliament more and going to places where I get energy again, that really helps.
Great. Yeah?
You hold? Okay. So you mentioned how in the parliament there is a clear lean to the right, but I feel that this is a very good reflection also in general of whole Europe. I think that's happening locally as well. And why do you think this is happening? Why do you think that people are leaning more to the right in general and they're not so much seeing, you know, the value in the left?
Yeah, it's a question we can talk about all night. Unfortunately, if I had the answer, then I'd probably be a multimillionaire strategist right now. But I think there's lots of reasons for it. One is the right tends to be a lot better at communication, I think, than the left. I think in the left there's always a lot of internal communication on our values and what we stand for and what our strategies would be. And my impression with the right is always that they just get on with it. They just talk about, you know, what their vision is and what their values are, but they don't overthink it. I think that's a problem, but I also think that the huge underlying problem that we have everywhere is inequality. It's massive inequality, and it's this complete discouragement of lots of people and disenfranchisement of I cannot, no matter how hard I try, I get ahead. And even though the policies, the ideas that the left has, you know, are probably going to make a much better difference, the right is much better at presenting it as though they will do things that those people suffering from that inequality and from this very, you know, bread and butter, my groceries are getting more expensive, my rent is getting more expensive, my kid can't find a house, you know, that they're the ones who are going to be solving that. And it's something, it's a nut that we need to crack, and Jurjen's going to tell us how to do it.
He knows how to do it. No pressure, but I think that that's a great opportunity for us to bring the other guests on board. Thank you so much, Lara, and yeah, you'll keep on joining us. So maybe please join us here. I'll move to this side of the table. Because as I said in the beginning, we'll also have the perspective of media, of journalism, and of advocacy, of NGOs. And I'll be trying to represent business interests tonight. We invited a few, but many declined, unfortunately. We invited VNO-NCW and of the Metropoolregio Amsterdam. So if you're watching, thanks for watching. For now, you have to do with me. So I'll be trying to ask some questions on their behalf. But for now, I'd like to invite the head of the EU desk. She's based in Brussels, and she's leading the desk there, the Follow the Money desk, which is an investigative journalism platform, does amazing research and journalism on EU affairs, and has recently published the book, Who's Watching Brussels? So please give her a warm round of applause. Lise Witteman. And I'm also super happy that the following guest is with us here tonight. He's a driving force of advocacy and NGOs in the Netherlands, one of the progressive forces, you could say, in the Netherlands. He knows all about campaigns in the Netherlands and in Europe. And he's being humble now, but we'll see if he has the answers. The director of DeGoedeZaak, Jurjen van den Berg. So welcome to you all. I will also get back to you. So if you have any questions at some point, just raise your hand at any point, and I will try to integrate as many questions as possible. We're going to talk about some advocacy in a moment, but I would just like to also hear your reflection a bit on this legislative package, which took a few years to craft. And I want to go also back to the early stages, Jurjen, because indeed, as Lara was saying, a few years ago, this was received as like a political triumph for citizens, for nature organizations, for labor organizations. You represent one of those organizations. How can you remember sort of receiving this as a political triumph?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it also was up there with the Green Deal, which was also a clear source of optimism. My campaigning legacy also lies in the moment where we defeated the TTIP treaty, which was also for us really a defining moment where we saw that you could actually put things on the agenda in Brussels and that it could actually help you move forward. I mean, this whole due diligence concept was for sure something that could also sort of show people that Brussels, European politics, really adds values to your daily life. And I really think I've also come to appreciate the beauty of European politics when it comes to the rapporteurship that Lara did and the way in which the legislative process actually sort of brought to the table what you could add to corporate scrutiny within European politics. On the other hand, we had been involved in the process of the green taxonomy. Don't want to get too technical, but this was sort of an early warning signal for us as well that I think virtually the same happened there. European Parliament had decided that we would actually phase out all types of fossil fuels, all types of fossil production, which was, when it was introduced, it wasn't a perfect package, but it was a good package. And then step by step, month by month, year by year, lobbyist visit by lobbyist visit, that taxonomy actually became sort of much more of a hollow shell. So we were sort of already on our toes that even though this felt like a clear victory, and we've had those victories on labor rights as well, for instance, but there's always this sort of skepticism that what you've achieved will not be the final sort of end product of this of a political process.
And that is something you apparently already learned a few years ago. Was that something that was unexpected for you, Ms. Wolters, that it was a political triumph, but then you can expect a few setbacks later on? Did you expect any of the watering down of your package?
Yes and no. I mean, does this like this? Yeah.
Yeah.
There was so much resistance along the way that we knew that not all of that resistance had evaporated. When I got re-elected, one of the first emails I got was from, I think, German employers saying, we want to talk to you about this law again. And I thought, but guys, this is done. It's been passed, leave it. So we knew that, but what I didn't know was to what extent the European Commission was going to be willing to humor those people still lobbying against. So we thought, yes, the resistance, of course, is still there. It's this sort of, simmering fire. You always got to be careful, but I didn't know to what extent Ursula von der Leyen had changed colors overnight as well. And I think that this was to do with her reappointment campaign. She must have done a tour of, I think German companies, CEOs in Europe, and I think that there must have been an element of she wanted to get reappointed. And I think that it was a little bit of a, we can help you get reappointed, but we've got our wish list here. Meaning that very, very quickly she needed to go and pay back some favors. And that's not the entire story. Maybe that's a bit too cynical, but I definitely think that is part of the story.
Ms. Witteman, you're the expert on lobbying. You know all the political juice from Brussels. You know about all the scandals. When you learned about this big sustainability package and that it was watering down, were you surprised?
Yes, because it went so quickly. Of course, lobbyists in Brussels, they play the long game. So politicians come and go, sorry to say, but those lobbyists will be there for decades, and they will be seeing they have long-term strategies, and they think, okay, sometimes we lose a battle and then we win another one again. So for them, it's just a part of a bigger battle. And then this was indeed one strike down, and then maybe we can come back again. So for them, they approach Brussels and policy making in a whole different way than we, as common people and journalists, look at a topic. And for them, it was probably indeed like, okay, this was disappointing that the law went through, but political majorities are shifting. New opportunity there. Let's take it, and that is how they see the whole playing field.
Yeah, and you also reported on what happened exactly, and we actually put it on a graph to actually see the concrete differences between the original package and the watered down package. So you can just really concretely see. First, it was just a stricter package. So this is about the proposal. Where companies with more than 500 employees would have to adhere to this legislation, so do their due diligence, make sure there's no human rights abuses, make sure you have high environmental standards. And you see then 4 years later, only really big companies basically have to adhere to these policies. Is that a correct way of saying? So this is basically first you had this, and then you had that really concrete, fantastic lobbying results.
Yeah, and now, and thanks also to a lot of journalists, diving into this, but we also know that in a very large part there was an oil and gas lobby that had this outsized influence on the whole thing. So ExxonMobil, and I talked to them recently in a setting in the Tweede Kamer.
Dutch Parliament.
In the Dutch Parliament, they play the long game, and they say, all we do is tell policymakers, what this looks like to us, and you can't blame members of Parliament, to see reason in what we tell them. They're free to vote however they want, but the amount of organizing, and we know that now through a lot of this research, but was so much more cynical than anything I've seen before. So in these strategies, that already I would have doubts, about writing strategies, putting things down on paper that are so questionable, but you would read things like, talk to far right members of parliament, and make them get involved in this law, or make sure that certain people in the European Commission, that they are sidelined in this process, but things that normally you wouldn't see, because lobbying is a game where you can win or lose, but up till now there were still gentlemen's rules, and they were very much to do with keeping the far right out, not lobbying the far right or encouraging the far right, because that might give you a short-term gain on a law, but it'll give you a long-term loss, because the whole European Union is at stake there. On your democratic institutions. Exactly. And you mentioned that this is an important sort of new dynamic within 50 plus years of European Parliament existence. Yeah. That there was always an agreement, some sort of a gentleman's agreement of non-cooperation with the far right, and that has only been breached last year. I think it was longer ago than last year, but indeed, and just to say one word about that gentleman's agreement, that wasn't a gentleman's agreement so that those in power can tell everyone else to go to sleep, and so that they can just stay in power because we like power. But that gentleman's agreement was there because, as much as politically parties might differ with each other, there was an awareness that if you let far-right parties into power, if you open the door to them participating in governing, etc., that the results, can be toxic. That the results of that can mean that your institutions might suffer, that trust in democratic processes might suffer, that the European Commission might lose its credibility, and that Europe as a whole, as a project, might start to be unwound. And that was the realization because of which parties in the center said, let's not do that. So that is a sort of a corollary or a consequence. Just next to the corporate lobbying power is also the influence of far-right parties in the European Parliament. Jurjen?
Yeah, it's fascinating how that shifted, because in this debate for a long time, VNO-NCW in the Netherlands, Business Europe in Europe, were always saying like there are bigger things at stake. And this was sort of a view on the economy that also large corporations thrive in a democratic society. And somewhere in this whole process of the far right really gaining power, also maybe because of the shifting balance globally, and the fact that for instance in the United States that autocracy has really taken over, you see that this like the strategy has changed, because at least like the short terms or short to medium long term gains are clearly much better for these business associations, simply because also like I really think that this also credits like processes within the parliament, like this one that Lara was a part of, but also processes outside of parliament, that if you actually start or keep working together with the center and you add the Social Democrats and the Greens to your majorities, that leads to a policy that a lot of the larger corporations really don't want to get into. So the fascinating thing is that really in my context with the employers' organizations, I've seen like up until the moment that we sort of reached that point of no return, where far-right politicians and far-right politics were becoming whitewashed a little bit and became sort of a fact of life, you saw that they also shifted. And they sort of started playing this realpolitik, where like at least in the short term, the sacrifice they had to do in terms of corporate responsibility were sort of larger than the sacrifices they did in a more sort of abstract way in terms of our institutions, our democratic values, etc., etc. And it really scares me that we've come to that point. Because at least I still remember that I think it was Bolkestein within the Netherlands that said at his very old age that dat we een playfiguur zouden slaan in Europa when Pim Fortuyn got to power. So sort of be a toilet figure, which was a really bad thing for a decent businessman. And now we've come to that point where it's sort of, well, yeah. On the other hand, what if we hand over the keys to Extinction Rebellion? So it's sort of, you really see that this narrative changes. And then I can completely concur with Lara that this is a time in which you're sort of, we're really far away from all these corporate responsibility, due diligence, sustainability measures that could actually sort of steer policy a little bit to the social and the green side.
And so what I'm hearing from your side is it's not just about policy itself, but it's really about democracy that you feel is eroding. On a more positive side, Jurjen, so if I can say that you're representing a bit the advocacy side here, what is unique, I think, in the European Parliament is that NGOs are actually invited, right? They get a seat at the table. When new policy is crafted, there will be some sort of so-called consultation rounds, and they invite, yes, lobbyists, but also NGOs fighting for human rights, labor rights, nature rights. In other words, you actually have a concrete say, you're invited. What does it look like for an organization like you?
Well, like I said, I like institution-wise, I rather like some aspects of the whole European democracy. For instance, those consultation rounds. We have an organization like the OECD that actually has formal representation of the unions as well as of employers' organizations. So, like, if you look at I think that the title of today is Who Writes Europe's Rules? The rules are written.
Stop TTIP.
Exactly.
You already managed.
The rules are written, I think, in a relatively fair way. The whole thing is like, well, you've shown that graph, or you did that introduction round where you sort of compared the numbers. And here's the big problem. I mean, even if you're formally consulted, how can you make use of it? And my experience is that the more organized you do it, you can actually use those institutions, use those processes, et cetera, to actually to actually use your people power. And I think the example of My Voice, My Choice is the most recent example of a proper citizens initiative that organized on a topic that was binding a lot of like centrists and progressives together.
Can you explain their success? So again, this was about protecting abortion rights across Europe. We're hearing indeed the right, the conservative are on they have momentum. The wave is there, and still progressive legislation like this gets kind of put on the agenda. How is that possible?
Yeah, I think it was a fascinating process, and they've really run a very clever campaign. I do think that the big success is sort of reaching out to any possible ally that you could have. We've been running for signatures for them as well. They've reached out to us. They've reached out to like all the progressive forces within countries, but also like social liberals, centrist social democrats, left-leaning liberals. Were all sort of really. They were prompted by this image of the United States becoming sort of a Handmaid's Tale type of setting. They've used this.
I know there's a few Americans in the room. Correct? Yes. No. Yes.
I'm really interested. Like, please nuance this if it's there. But not, I think they've used the antagonism and they've sort of made it a very fascinating cultural theme, which was. Less politicized than maybe a couple of other progressive topics. And the interesting thing is that if you look at the way they're now using their social media, they're just moving on to topics that are much more like much more high risk, much more much more on point of where the social divide is, and this is clever campaigning.
Yeah.
You sort of you take this issue and give people a win that they can believe in, and now they're moving on to like the topics that are also at stake.
Ms. Witteman, I must be honest, I was always skeptical about the European Citizens Initiative, because I think many of the initiatives failed because, 1 million on 400 plus Europeans maybe doesn't sound like much, but it's a lot of people still to assemble, to mobilize. What is your take as a journalist on the European Citizens Initiative? Is it symbolism, like symbol democracy, or keeping the people happy?
I think
or is it
for
true democracy?
anti-cynical quotes, you have to maybe go back to
Yes.
Jurjen. Maybe
I'm just testing you here.
No, the thing is, of course, when I went to Brussels, that was in 2018. I used to work in The Hague on politics, also journalism. And I really had this vision of Europe, and indeed of being this democratic, like the ultimate democratic institution, where the rule of law is super powerful. And of course there are stories, but you know, I was a bit disappointed, I have to say, when I really looked into indeed who runs Europe. Because if you then look at the specific subjects like the ones mentioned, but also for instance farming policy, the amount of you could really say misleading people, misleading citizens, especially because there are not that many journalists in Brussels. Sounds odd, but it's a truth. It's very easy to get your narrative across if you are the one saying it most often and the loudest that farmers are suffering because of the Green Deal. People will just start repeating it and believing it. And if there's no powerful counter voice and no counterfacts to show that this is just not true, if you look at the evidence, then it will continue to be so. And now if you ask a farmer, is the Green Deal bad for you? And then they would say yes, and that is not according to research. So I'm afraid that also when it comes to the rule of law, and that is something very recent, that you saw that the European People's Party, as indeed Lara just mentioned, super powerful party. You can't imagine, nobody has heard of it. Super powerful, really running Europe.
The Christian Democrats.
Yeah, and in those the German Christian Democrats, to be fair. And in those the German Christian Democrats, it's actually like the CSU, the people from the Bayern,
yeah, province in
and
South
that is where
Germany.
many industries also come from. There's a very strong conservative part that understands very well how to play industries. Manfred Weber, the leader of the European People's Party, is from that area. He has this whole network of politicians, but also people in industries, and also even high up in the European Commission, that help them indeed with all the simplification laws that are now being put there on the table. And they all say, we are just standing up for the ordinary man. We're standing up for SMEs. But those SMEs are like hundreds of millions of euros. That's not like the bakery around the corner, but it's a whole different. But they know how to use the image, and they work together now with Trump allies, with people, with the Republicans, and there's indeed no taboos anymore, no shame anymore. So are things going well? No, no, and also.
And the European Citizens Initiative is not going to bring about
I'm sorry.
major change. Jurjen? It's not a panacea for European democracy.
See, the thing that I liked in Lara's analysis is you have to play a long game, also when you're campaigning. And really, I think, like these successes, My Voice, My Choice, really, I think, is a first step in a long game, sort of trying to reintroduce a winning streak in progressive campaigning. The same thing is what we did in those trade campaigns. I remember back in the day in my study time, we were already working on the general agreement on trade and services and these kinds of trade politics. And 20 years later, with the same people, we sort of got that on the agenda. We gained momentum and we actually won a campaign.
20 years later, okay. So what is the one we should start now and in 20 years we're done? That is a big question. So
Yeah.
as you say, you say we should think and act like lobbyists play the long game, because as you said quite eloquently, politicians are not to stay and lobbyists are.
And
that is an
I
important
think
message.
If I may add one point, there's the big thing you need to do, I think, when you're campaigning and when you're organizing, is use those institutions in your favor. Because, like I said, you have a European court, you have a European Court of Justice, you have all these kinds of rules and bylaws in which all steps of European democracy are being shaped. TTIP has been stopped by the Walloon government.
Maybe you have
Which-
to say what TTIP is.
Yes, TTIP is the transnational trade and investment partnership between the US and Europe, sort of big free trade agreement, which would have made everybody happier and wealthier. But many organizations and governments in Europe especially were afraid that social and environmental standards in Europe would actually go down. So
Yeah.
it didn't happen.
No, and the fascinating thing there, like we were teaming up with so many of these clever trade union campaigners, consumer foundation campaigners. We've even worked together for the Dutch people here. Caroline van der Plas was on our team.
The Farmers' Party.
Yeah, who turned out to be like not so much of an ally anymore. But back then it was really great to also have her campaigning power there. What happened there was the interests of Europe uniting each other around a topic that had an impact on everything from quality of life, quality of food, up until workers' rights, etc., etc. And that is how I think you win campaigns in the European context.
Yeah.
Understand what the context is you're working in, play the long game, and connect the dots of interests of people.
Lara, coming back to that question the gentleman asked a bit earlier about how does lobbying work, you already mentioned it's quite in open air. You invite people, you go to them, etc. You have a coffee, you discuss work. How are you dealing nowadays with inviting NGOs or corporate lobbyists? Do you have some sort of a strategy or a method? Do you keep track of I'm spending so much time with person X and so much time with person Y? How do you go about being influenced by others?
Quite intuitively. So there's rules on these things. We have a transparency register where we're supposed to note the meetings that we have with third parties, so you can see that. So that's an incentive for thinking about who you're meeting to.
Even grabbing a coffee with, let's say, I call you next week?
Yeah. With you, I'm not sure it would go on the register. I don't know if you're registered as a lobby organization. I
Not
don't
yet.
think so, but I think it's something quite intuitive, because you know that all the large multinationals and the big corporations and the umbrella organizations for the SMEs as well, and they have a very willing partner in the Christian Democrats. So you know that whenever, the CEO of a large German company wants to have a coffee with Manfred Weber, boss of the EPP, that, they will be having that coffee, and that all those emails that they send to members of the European Parliament will probably be answered quite quickly by members of the Christian Democrats. And what that means in practice is that, for me, and my team knows this, and I think a lot of people on the progressive side are the same, but there's a sort of hierarchy, and it's, if trade unions want to meet you, or NGOs want to meet you, or public institutions, or maybe academics, or those get priority over the multinationals, and it's not, or over the large corporations, and it's not because I don't want to talk to them. But and it's important also that when you're working on something big, you hear things from all sides. But it's mainly that since there's limited time, you got to choose how to spend your time, and that with all the money the other side has, they're going to be listened to anyway. So I see it as my job, and many of my colleagues are the same, to go and focus rather more on that other side of the spectrum.
Clear.
Can I say
Yes.
Because this is where already the first selection indeed comes in. But what is interesting, this is a selection of the people that and the institutions that do reach out. But when you look at policies, there's a lot of knowledge, for instance, with universities, and those academics are not going to pick up the phone and say, Lara, the law that you're working on, I saw something and maybe we should talk about it. So there's already a huge selection very early on that people just don't reach out. Citizens often also don't reach out. So because there's such limited time, especially also with the European Commission having indeed only 30,000 people working there, which sounds like a lot, but it's like 1 or 2, 3 people who actually know about the essence of a policy. They often, they just have to rely on whomever approaches them because they don't have the time to go and dig in for like weeks or months into research papers and understand every technical detail. They just have to rely on whomever approaches them. And so this is also where money plays a part in Brussels because of course there's also some corruption and bribery, but actually that's just a small part of what the role that money plays. But the bigger part is that if you have a lot of money as a lobbying organization, you can try on every level, on every field to approach people and to send your narrative. Because it's never about, I would like to have this bridge in Italy, so I'm going to say to the European Commission, please give me money for a bridge. You would say, this bridge is a strategic part of the future European defense, la-di-da-di-da. So that is, of course, how you would sell it. And if you manage to come up with a great narrative that really taps into what the European Commission is looking for, then your biggest thing is to start selling it, and then to sell it within panel discussions that you, of course, have paid for, to indeed approach every member of the European Parliament that you think would be, that maybe is not so very clever and could be, leaning towards your narrative. To be at the European Commission, of course, at the countries, that's a big thing. Lobbying goes often through the member states, through the governments. When Shell was still Dutch, not anymore, but when Shell was still Dutch, they would approach the government and then the government would lobby for them in Brussels. That is how it works. Even already at universities, the College of Europe in Bruges, they would already be there lecturing Facebook or whatever. So it's everywhere. And that is the difference that money makes. The difference is that you can go to a think tank and say, do this neutral research on this topic that really would favor me. And then, of course, you have these numbers and figures that you can then present to the European Commission. And the NGO doesn't have the money to do the same. And that is where what it means to have like 5 times more money. That is what the difference really makes.
That's a beautiful story and summary of how lobbying actually works, I think. Any questions so far from you? Any intricacies you want to know of?
Hi. Yeah, this is adding on to what you just said. Do you also think that journalists might also play a role in that? So, for example, that a lobbying organization would pay journalists to get a certain story or a certain narrative to be told? Or is it only on the higher sort of levels that are visible?
Yeah, the role of the media.
We're actually getting into that, the third part.
We're getting into that.
Perfect. So we can now, this is a perfect stepping stone. So indeed, the role of journalists and journalists being paid, I assume you can also tell us something about an important media organization in Brussels, Politico, on which you write also in your book. What is the role of media, let's say, in?
So to start with the good part, it has been investigated that indeed the whole role of money that I just displayed, it like vanishes when the media sheds a light on the issue. Then the whole democratic power field is more or less back to as it should, like the one argument against the other. Then it's a public discussion, and that is what happened with TTIP, which was first a very technical acronym, nobody knew what it was about, and then indeed, thanks to NGOs putting it on display and making sure it was something that was written about in the media, it came a valid discussion, and in the end, public opinion mattered, because in the end, politicians do want, to be re-elected. When it is tricky is in Brussels, for instance, Politico indeed. So you have had in the past really sponsored content, where the differences between original content and sponsored content was hardly to be seen. And for Politico, we were very happy first in 2014-15 when Politico arrived in Europe, in Brussels, because finally 100 new journalists arrived in Brussels, and they would write about European affairs. And of course, more journalism is good for European democracy, because then indeed that light would be shed on more matters. But Politico isn't there because they have a free website. Of course, that's not a business model to have a free website and a free newsletter, and that's maybe the part that you guys know. But the real earning model is to make sure these pro newsletters that businesses and lobbyists pay like €1,500 per vertical, what it's named, like energy or competition, to make sure, to get leaked documents, to get behind-the-scenes information, and to sell that through those newsletters to the people who can afford it. Again, the people with the deepest pockets. And therefore, really, information is the thing that makes Brussels go round. They sell this information to the people that can then act on it. If you know, okay, this commissioner is actually going to do something that is tricky, we have to do something, then you need information fast. Information is super important. So that is what they sell. And so what they don't do, if they have these very valuable sources, is to go and write critically about them. So they have all these great sources within the European Commission, but they are not going to be the watchdog. If you see like the big stories, the big scandals, the big things that are going on, that really have an effect on the positions of citizens. It's often not Politico that reveals them, despite all those journalists, but Le Monde or other, or of course Follow the Money, because they are not looking for that kind of information. They are looking for information that they can sell. That being said, of course, there are some very good journalists at Politico, and it did make a difference, because even for me, when I do investigation, I do like paper trailing. I look into what has been written before, who said that, and those are pieces of the puzzles that I do use. So it's very double.
It's a nuanced picture. Yeah, they're still an important source of information and getting the public debate sort of more lively. But you're also saying they also have a sort of some sort of moral hazard in accepting funding. They're not so a critical watchdog as you like. Jurjen, sorry?
No, just to say that I was told that not only are they owned by Axel Springer, but that political journalists now in their contracts have to sign some kind of clause that says that they adhere to free market values or whatever the phrasing is.
And pro-Israel, that's also part of the... Yeah.
So it is a bizarre concoction of different interests. And again, not without value, but yeah, important to know.
Yes, and so the role of watchdogs is an important one. I think many of us share the feeling that it's sometimes quite difficult to know what's going on in Brussels. Lise, you're obviously trying to make a difference in Brussels by being there, by being present. Why is it the case that so little journalists are there? Why is it boring? Is it too expensive to get journalists there? What's wrong with the design that so little journalists are present?
Also a topic for an evening, but the short answer will be it's like a chicken and egg effect. So it used to be that journalists would go to Brussels and report, be a correspondent, which is strange because in a sense it's like, it's not really foreign affairs, but and they would report about it, and they would write their stories a bit more like in the same technical manner as the policymakers would, tell it. So that was, Europe used to be for a long time something for the technocrats, and so the reporting was also quite boring about, legislative processes, and not the house of cards that I see in Brussels with, winners and losers and tension. And big battles over big money. And so because there was not a lot of enthusiasm about that kind of reporting, not a lot of clicks to say, editors-in-chief would send less reporters to Brussels. And then there was even less reporting about Brussels, and then people didn't know anyone, nobody ever heard of Lara Wolters. And so, would they care if she was in the headlines? They would just automatically skip it. And so it was like, how do you say,
Self-fulfilling
yes, self-fulfilling
prophecy.
prophecy. Yeah. And that is sadly where we have ended up now. And the only thing that media can do now is to just ignore that people don't care or don't understand, and just go start this uphill battle again and thinking creatively, like, how are we going to report about it? I actually started together with some other people about organizing a comedy show in Brussels to try to, make it more vivid. And that is a big battle for the media. I think they have been very disappointing in the way they've approached Brussels politics for a long time, and now we have to try to and it's a very hard job, but to shift it a bit. But you see things changing. Oh. The NOS, the public broadcaster of the Netherlands, now instead of 3 people, they have now 4 people. Yes.
And have you seen and noticed that difference? Because from my perspective, I have the feeling Europe, because of what's happening in the world, because of the uncertainty you described, there is more interest in what's going on in Brussels. Do you feel you're being approached more, that the press is becoming more important, that Dutch audiences, other European audiences are more aware of your work?
My sense is always that when there's a big crisis or there's a lot of global uncertainty, and I mean, God knows there's a lot of that at the moment, that it's good for Europe as a whole, because citizens will think of, the solutions that Europe can provide. I don't think there are many people who think, oh, there's a pandemic, there's COVID, but every European member state must go and solve that on its own. I mean, people will naturally think, yeah, of course, that means that Europe needs to go fix this together. The problem that I see sometimes in these moments of crisis, and that can be Liberation Day, the Trump tariffs or whatever it may be, war in Iran, is that in those moments, the power shifts very much to the people at the very top. And so the people at the very top will usually be the leader of France, the leader of Germany, maybe the leader of Italy, the president of the European Commission, and they will talk amongst themselves. I'm giving some examples, depending on what the case might be, and members of the European Parliament, even Mr. Manfred Weber, in moments like those, will be a bit more sidelined. And so what our uphill battle is making sure that in those moments that the European Parliament can still hold the European Commission to account, or that if we get frustrated with European leaders because they're not doing the right thing, that we talk about that in the Parliament and that we battle it out, because you need to have some public forum where you can have those discussions. So it's a story of, yes, more attention, but not necessarily on the European Parliament.
Jurjen, you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I think there are these epic battles that are actually being fought out in the European Parliament and within the European institutions. Like, for instance, the power of big tech, which is being backed by, again, this autocratic government that I will not bash again, but it is there. The fossil fuel lobby, for instance, that is using that has felt the threat of actually Europe sort of coming together and trying to regulate, and is actively battling deregulation. And the fascinating thing is, like, the whole premise of Lise's media outlet, Follow the Money. This makes for us as campaigners, this makes for a totally logical sort of story where you can really say, like, this is what's at stake in Europe. My analysis has always been that if you want to win a campaign, people also need to feel that it's solvable, and that has been lacking for people. Like, if I would talk to people 20 years ago again about these trades-in services, they would go like, "Yeah, great, go ahead. It sounds really horrible. Do your thing," but they wouldn't sort of latch onto it and go like, "This is my problem for today." However, if you keep on sort of putting stuff on the agenda and telling that story where you really show, like, this is our end goal, this is our hero, which is the European citizen itself, this is our villain, which is big business within Europe and the power of money, then you have this narrative that you can actually campaign on. And the fascinating thing is, like, if I may take that leap, the question the question to Lara was, how can progressives regain the narrative? I really think my solution is like, come up with practical things that you can do for people. Obviously now the biggest cliche that you can mention is be like Zoran Mandani, but it is basically what it is, to sort of really have this clear picture of like whom and what you are battling, and then also find ways to show people that there is a pathway towards doing like small, concrete, reasonable steps that actually get you there. Which, for instance, the Social Democrats also did on minimum wage and these kinds of very important bread and butter issues. So my experience in like our baby steps in campaigning in Europe has been like, if you can tell these kinds of a story, you're also controlling a narrative that's much more interesting to report on. And by that, politicians like Lara also can shine and sort of make their types of solutions much more sort of achievable.
And if I can just add one thing to that, it's that in Dutch we say op een gegeven moment keert de wal het schip. At some point the shore will shift the ship. I don't think that's the right translation, but I think that the world is changing to such an extent, and the US has changed, and China is changing, and we feel threats from all over. And I think that even though ideally progressives would have come up with their own proactive story on what it is we need to do much earlier, but I think that the contrast between what we don't want to be and what we don't want to happen is becoming so much more pronounced now that it might help us in telling that narrative. And for me, what I always say, and I'm glad you said what you just said, because I really thought when you said that we needed to tell a practical story of how Europe matters for citizens, and very often people then start talking about the single European phone charger, and then I always lose it because I find it so uninspiring. It's great, but I always think that the story of Europe needs to be this story of Europe should be an oasis in the desert, or it should be a place of quality, and we should have quality jobs and quality institutions, and people should feel safe and they should feel good because you're allowed to have holidays here and you've got healthcare. And I think that painting this picture, before was maybe a little bit too lyrical, or maybe if we try to tell a story like that, because they always say you need to campaign in a positive way, but maybe that would fall on deaf ears a little bit. But because of the contrast, because of the threats we're now seeing, because we see that the rule of law is actually not very difficult to dismantle, and nuclear threats really are out there, and jobs are at risk of being replaced by AI, and all these things that are a lot for all of us to take. I mean, I won't be the only one, awake at night about some of these things, but what it does do is put in contrast what we don't want as Europe, and I think, who we want to be.
So what I'm hearing is that there's a lot at stake. We need to find practical, solvable issues and get organized, and maybe start small, baby steps. That is exactly, I think, what some of the people in this room have been doing. So before I invite them, can I please get a really warm round of applause for our panel? Thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure and I'm hoping that maybe if you have more questions, you'll stick around at the bar for a minute after the show to ask any other questions you might still have. So thank you again, Lise Witteman, Lara Wolters and Jurjen van den Berg. Then now, indeed, some people have been organizing across Europe on these massive issues, trying to make them small, tangible, and just start somewhere, because we have to start somewhere. That's what we heard and learned today. So we'll have 5 lightning talks for you to get an idea of what a campaign could look like. And I'm super already enthusiastic and proud that they are all here presenting their campaigns. And maybe this is also a source of inspiration if you have never organized something, but you feel like there's a lot going on. Maybe I want to do something. Maybe I want to get organized. Listen closely, and afterwards, let's discuss together. for now, I'd like to give the floor, first of all, to Vicky from Athens. And Athens was the city that was discussing and campaigning 3 different campaigns around migration. But from every city, we'll hear one representative about their own campaign. So please give her a really warm round of applause. Here's Vicky.
You know, I don't like this.
No.
And thank you, Dylan.
And this one.
You can hear me? Yes. So thank you for this opportunity to be here and, of course, for the Eco Academy. So as he said, in Athens, maybe I should be standing somewhere here. In Athens, we were dealing with the issue of migration, and my team had the in-between as a notion of fragmentation and suspension, but also as a placement of constant becoming. So we tried to focus more on the psychological and emotional limbo of being a migrant and avoid all headlines and vivid imagery that is already present in everything that we see these days. So we are kind of becoming immune to it. So first, we ran a small pre-campaign campaign on social media, trying to keep as much as possible the essence of it, giving the atmosphere and the emotion and not that much data or big headlines. So what we did, we created an installation. And we created an installation. We wanted an immersive project where actually visitors would feel how it feels to be suspended between worlds, between a past you can no longer stay, a present that you are not really welcomed, and a possible what-if future. So it was a sequence of rooms, actually. The first one was the past memories. It was an underlit environment where people could use flashlights to go and explore deeper if they wanted, with items and pictures of the past. Just giving this feeling of how it could be in a dreamlike environment. But as in all dreams, you cannot stay in the past forever, so we were asking them to move to the transition. It was a corridor with this video playing behind it just to show exactly what transition felt to us. A space and a time, no matter how big or small, that you enter, voluntarily or not, and you leave your mark on it, and it lives on you. Then you would move, the sound here is not playing, but it's okay, the present heterotopias. So you enter a room where you can see only 2 flashlights and you have 2 sound devices, one playing Greek sounds, a Greek language, people on the street, Greek music, and on the other hand you have mosque or like people speaking different languages, so you could move freely back and forth. And as you moved closer to one device, you could hear, of course, the soundscape more clearly, and to the other, the same. But in the middle, it was kind of unsettling, let's say. No one wanted to be in the middle. So we were kind of asking visitors this question. So if you really want to belong to your present, does that mean that you have to leave something behind? And with that question, we were moving to the last room, a possible what if. A huge installation of mirrors, some fragmented and some not, depicting different parts of you and the other visitors in the room with you. So for us, the essence of the whole project was to ask the right questions to provoke reflection over the issue. And the very last one, and with that we were leaving the visitors, and I will leave you, was if we accept that we are all in pieces, we carry different pieces, then is society and the future broken beyond repair, or is it an opportunity to see it like a mosaic, as our installation here, and see function and beauty in the pieces? And that's me. So thank you. If you want, you can scan the QR code or come with questions later. Thank you, Dylan.
No, of course. Thank you so much, Vicky. So indeed, feel free to still scan the QR code and otherwise approach any of the participants always after a couple of minutes. We'll now move on. My Bulgarian is terrible. So I'm not going to try to pronounce this, badly informed. But I'm going to invite the following speakers who have been trying to tackle this very important topic, and we know it's more and more increasingly important, democracy. And some amazing people from Bulgaria have been tackling this topic. So please join me in welcoming Zdravko and Evgenia.
So hi everyone, I'm Evgenia and this is Zdravko, and we are coming from Sofia, where our biggest problem right now is democracy. And democracy is a very big word, and we basically started with going out in the street and asking people, okay, what do you know about democracy? And what we found is that actually people kind of forget that they have democratic rights. And especially when it comes to young people, not only that they forget, but they kind of don't know about them as well. So what we decided to do is to actually make democracy, kind of cool for them, show them that it's not only both men in suits in parliament. We added some flames to it, we used some slang, and we came up with the campaign called Kvote Pali in Bulgarian, which Dylan missed to pronounce. Next time, maybe better. But which basically means what makes you burn or what fires you up.
So with the modern slang as well, we were like, okay, where are the young people nowadays? Because they're not outside on the street, they're on their phones. So we decided to make a little online campaign where people can say what makes them burn. They can say what they're interested in. Like they want to say, I don't like this, I like this. They can have a voice, because what we see is that young people are afraid. They feel that they don't have a voice, and they're afraid to say it. And if someone says it, someone else will join. Other one will join. We will make a whole group of people that can actually act on something. So how do we do that? Well, online, of course. And we had an Instagram profile and TikTok profile that basically exploded overnight. A lot of people were really interested. We had a lot of texts. I want to do that, I want to do that. Even we had a girl that was like, I have a car, we can fix the trash in our district. It was amazing. And so, but before this explosion, we were like, okay, we don't need only to tell stuff, but we have to act. We have to show them that we have to act together. So we made one little event that we call Spark Event. In this Spark Event, we just saw different people. We were making them draw what is burning them on the ground. It was really, the weather also was like really cold, so it wasn't really burning in the first place. But this little spark was enough for, even in this cold weather, to have this fire together. Yeah.
So, the point of it all was that if we actually join forces and if we actually show people that maybe, if someone else also has that opinion, we can join together and actually start acting on things. And we just gave chalks to people. They started writing on the ground. Of course, there was some hateful messages, but at some point it was quite beautiful because it was kind of like an art installation, and people were countering hate messages with flowers or like actually responding to them and making them, here it says, people don't smile anymore. So people just, we should smile. We should, never mind. Okay, we should smile. We should act together and actually work for democracy, claim our rights.
Yeah.
Yeah, and do better.
Thank you so much, Zdravko and Evgenia. And I like the echo on that microphone. I don't know if other people heard it, but you sounded like Zoran Mandani in a big hall. Athens and democracy. Then we move on to another huge topic, biodiversity and biodiversity loss. And And we had also an amazing group in Berlin with Public Art Lab, and representing Berlin here with us today is Shitija.
Okay, am I audible? Yeah? Yes. Okay, hi everyone. It's lovely to be here today. And I think with something like biodiversity, the first question we sat with is that how do we narrow it down? And for us, we started looking at the biodiversity that was in our immediate environment, also somehow sort of blurring the lines between our natural and immediate environments. And it started with what we did was creating a space to really connect with a non-vascular plant called the moss, which we're all aware of, but somehow just runs in the background, but is doing the most amazing things for the environment. It absorbs a lot of carbon dioxide through the process of weathering in forests. It also cools down the environment and has significant ecological impact. So the idea, I will stay behind for a sec. The idea was to understand how, through connecting with mosses, how we can understand urban biodiversity better. And I will go a bit further into how we actioned the campaign. But for us to think about the future impact of remossing was also two of the United Nations Sustainable Goals, which was how it can impact climate action and also make our cities actually a lot more sustainable. So our campaign goal was really to collectively help communities, individuals reframe a lot of neglected urban spaces. Berlin has a lot of abandoned spaces which are just sitting there, and somehow, apart from humans, there's so much life there. And so it was the idea of reframing these neglected spaces and really teaching people how, through moss, a plant that is so simple to propagate, to learn about, to grow, and also through that encouraging a lot of restorative and regenerative practices. And we did this through 3 actions. One was to plant the moss. The second was to play with the moss, a little bit of tactile play. And the third was to actually learn how to grow moss. And we did this through something called a little take on DIY kits called Grow It Yourself kits, which I also have here. You can have a look at it maybe later. And this is a bit from our exhibition at TinCon, which is one of the biggest youth conferences that happens in Berlin, along with Republica every year. And it was lovely because we had so many people come and just really get their hands dirty. And I think it's lovely to learn through getting your hands dirty what is it like to touch soil again, to spray water on moss. And this is a little sample kit from the kits we had there. We had about 75 of them, and all of them were gone, and people really left with a lot of new knowledge about the mosses. And here is our team that I would like to say thank you to, of course. I'm also representing them. And I will also take this moment to also thank Dylan, the DAMO team, and Public Art Lab, and everybody who was involved. It was a wonderful experience, and for any one of you that are joining here today, if you get a chance to do something like this, I cannot recommend it enough. And yeah, if you want to talk about sustainable urban futures or biodiversity, I'm here. You can find me here after. You can also scan the QR code, and if you're in Berlin, come say hi.
Thank you so much, Sitija. I'm going to get my hands dirty on one of those grow kits later.
Yes, of course.
Are they also giveaways, or are they...
Yeah, I can. I have a few of them, but for sure, yeah,
okay.
We have some.
Okay,
yeah.
Be quick, be quick. Next up, tackling another big topic, obviously climate change. And one of those hot cities, maybe some of you have visited, know it's hot in the summer, it's Barcelona. So we went there and discussed climate change, and representing that city's academy is Bertille.
Oh.
Nice. The rest of
I don't know. This one? No, the one in the middle. Yeah, that's what I was clicking. Okay, there it is. Perfect. Okay. Hi, everyone. So I'm Bertie from Barcelona, and I'm going to present you Hope Lab Lower the Heat, Plant the Change campaign. So by 2050,
Barcelona will be the city with the highest number of deaths related in Europe. Around 250,000 people will be affected, according to recent research. When our group did our research and came across this number, it really scared us. But what scared us even more was that every summer we see the temperature rise, we read the headlines, we hear the warnings, and still we don't act. The gap is where our project Hope Lab started. As you may know if you've been, Barcelona is squeezed between the mountains and the sea. It cannot expand outwards, so the construction grows denser, green spaces shrink within the city, and the heat traps itself with us within it. But what we also know is the plants cool the air and offer the shade that we desperately need in the summer. And we asked ourselves, why, despite knowing all of this, the facts, do people still not act? And our answer was, people don't need more facts, more information, they need to feel. Because we know also that our brain connects the world through senses much more powerfully than through statistics and numbers. And so instead of another awareness campaign, we decided to design a sensory experience. Inside a closed room, we created the heat artificially and layered it with sounds and visual noise of constructions, absence of birds, disappearance of nature, because the climate crisis isn't only about the temperature rising, but also everything else that is disappearing with it. And to guide the visitor through the experience, we created a narrative inspired by Janus, the Roman god of two faces, one looking back and one looking forward. It called the visitor to take action now, moving the plants from Janus's garden to the artificial future Barcelona and see for themselves the positive impact it was having. To create Janus's garden, we partnered with local plant shop who provided and later sold the plant used during the experience to the visitors. And we also had the chance to partner with 2 community spaces leading garden activities to the participant. And what the visitor told us afterward, it really confirmed our intuition. People know the facts, they know what is coming, they know what they feel every summer. But what they like is a community to change the daunting into a little bit more hope. This project also shaped my own path because thanks to ECO, I found my master's internship in a sustainable arts association where now I continue working on climate and community. So yeah, thank you so much for that again.
Thank you so much, Bertie. Lovely also to hear a big topic on climate change being broken down. And as you can already see, I forgot to mention that maybe the common denominator is that these are all very artistic interventions. Many of them are designers, artists, visual creatives in any form. So always beautiful designs. I'm very jealous. Last but not least, another big topic, of course, is AI. How are we not going to be ruled by AI ourselves? That is one of the questions these teams were asking themselves. So please join us for the final presentation of tonight by Maarten from Amsterdam.
Yes. Yes. Hello, everybody. My name is Maarten, and I will talk to you about our campaign, which is called Use Your Brain. And basically, what this campaign was all about was to stimulate critical thinking, in the age of AI, because we really feel like this is an important topic, which is something which we might actually lose with all of these innovations that AI will bring. So what I will do first is I will explain a little bit why we think this is important. Then I will talk about what our campaign looked like, or I'll show it. And then finally, I'll also try to connect a little bit with... Is Lara still here? No? She just left a little bit too late. Shame for that. But to connect, to give a message to Europe, basically on a European level, what we can do to continue with this. So about the problem, there are many reasons that we think that critical thinking is important. But I wanted to give this example. So if you look at this set of videos, how many do you think that they are generated by AI? It's a little bit of a quiz test. You can raise your finger, so. Okay, guys, that's way too many. It's only one. It's only one. The one in the middle. So the chess-playing monkey is fake. Monkeys can do monkey business. So this is one of the problems that we saw. But during our preparation for the campaign, we learned that there's actually an underlying problem here. And that also has to do with animals, only a little bit of a different kind. It's basically this. We, as users of AI tools, we are being treated like sheep by the AI companies who are creating these tools and really play this narrative that it will be everywhere, it's going to improve everything, and we just simply have to follow. And that is an issue, because in that, let's say, innovation, there are things which we will lose. And we have to keep reminding ourselves of that. And one of the main things is critical thinking. This was not our own idea. I will get to you how we got there at the end. But what did our campaign look like? It looked like this. We basically tried to exaggerate a situation where if we would really stop with our critical thinking and follow the instructions of AI blindly, this is what the output might look like, and we would start spreading peanut butter across our bike to fix it. And there are a series of other videos as well, and we really had a good reach, more than 10,000 views, so that was much more than we even imagined. But bringing it back to what the program was earlier, like, what do we want to tell the EU with this? So we have this strong narrative which is driven by these AI companies and which is really having a lot of impact on our society within Europe. And the only thing that the EU has done is really put a restrictive policy against that. And now we feel that what we've learned from these two people, but also from other experts in the field, these two specifically have inspired me, that's why I added them, to come up with a different narrative, and a narrative that would actually empower the general public to increase that quality of life that was just mentioned, using AI. And basically what would say what's needed for that is we need a standpoint on what is used that increases our quality of life, and we need norms and values around that, and then this narrative to really manifest that. That's it. Thanks for and thanks you as well.
Thank you so much, Maarten, also for this amazing presentation. So brief and full of wit and humor. And with that, we're coming to an end of tonight's program, Who Writes Europe's Rules, or Who Rules Europe? I hope you've learned a lot. I hope you got inspiration to maybe start a campaign yourself, or get engaged, get organized with some organization, become a member of an investigative journalism platform like Follow the Money, check out DeGoedeZaak. So if you have any questions, or remarks or feedback or comments, please join us for a drink at the bar downstairs. And for now, thank you so much for joining, and hopefully next time. And I would just like to ask the ECHO participants